never give up until the goal was reached. My heroes and their heroes before them were driven by this notion. So was the entire NASA team when they started this amazing journey into space. Our heroes and legends drive us into the future. Each generation inspires the next to go further into the unknown, beyond our solar system, beyond our galaxy. I can't wait to see where you will go.
You go up to the end of this 25-foot tunnel, and then move you toward the spacecraft.
Suddenly realizing my visor was getting fogged up. My heart rate was running 140, 50, 60 times 100 seconds.
And then he says, Tom, my back is broken.
Rocket. It represents NASA's earliest efforts to send humans into space. These Redstone rockets were formerly ballistic missiles provided to NASA by the U.S. Army. In October of 1958, NASA formally organized Project Mercury with a mission to investigate man's reaction to this new environment and safely recover the capsule and its pilot. Man rating for human spaceflight on what was previously a ballistic missile was no easy task. After several modifications and test flights, a Mercury capsule carrying Ham, a chimpanzee, was successfully launched and recovered on January 31st, 1961. Just months later, on May 5th, astronaut Alan Shepard launched on a Mercury Redstone rocket, becoming the first American in space. Hi,
we're going to leave it like that for a moment. But as you see, we cleared the security entrance, and of course now we are making our way towards the vehicle assembly building. And as we do so, you want to make sure that you have your camera in video as we make our way.
Janet Petro, and welcome to NASA's John F. Kennedy Space Center, where NASA astronauts have ventured forth on flights of exploration since the 1960s. And what an exciting time to visit our multi-user spaceport. Through our Commercial Crew program, we are sending astronauts to the International Space Station from American soil for the first time since the Space Shuttle program ended in 2011. We're continuing to launch new research experiments and supplies to the space station with our commercial resupply services and launching the most technologically advanced scientific instruments to date into space through our Launch Services program. This all culminates in our ultimate mission, the Artemis program, where NASA will return to the moon, this time with the first woman and first person of color, and continue on to Mars. In all our history, there's been one common theme woven throughout our DNA. It's our insatiable desire to explore beyond our home planet in our never-ending quest to expand our knowledge of the universe. As you venture behind the gates, you'll find a community of the most talented, dedicated, motivated workforce anywhere in the world who believe in the unlimited potential of space exploration. This is an active spaceport where new things are happening every day. You never know what you might see, so enjoy your tour.
It is one of the largest buildings in the world by volume, and is the place where NASA completes the final assembly of its rockets before launch. The sheer scale of this building is hard to grasp, even when you're right next to it.
Do you ever feel really small when you think about space? What about when you're standing next to a skyscraper or a really big bridge? Well, I feel about as small as an ant right now. I'm standing inside the vehicle assembly building trying to grasp how large it really is in here. It has 4 bays. Each bay has 2 large horizontal doors below it and 7 smaller vertically opening doors above it, tall enough to fit the world's largest the largest stores in the world.
Construction of the VAB required 65,000 cubic yards of concrete, 45,000 steel beams, 1 million steel bolts, amounting to almost 100,000 tons of steel. Notice the flag painted on the outside of the VAB? It's the size of a 21-story building. The blue section alone is the size of an NBA basketball court. Each star is 6 feet across, and each red and white stripe is wide enough for this bus to drive down. And the entire VAB? It's so huge that the Roman Colosseum would fit on the roof with room to spare for a parking lot. By volume, the VAB can fit 3.5 Empire State Buildings, and it would take 250 billion ping pong balls to fill it. It was built in the 1960s for the Apollo program. Every Saturn V rocket that sent humans to the moon was assembled right here. Every space shuttle mission also assembled within these same walls. After the space shuttle program, a major renovation to the inside of this building began to accommodate NASA's next generation of rockets, the Space Launch System, or SLS. Lockheed Martin has developed a capsule called Orion that will sit atop the SLS rocket. This capsule is designed to facilitate human exploration of the moon and eventually Mars.
Now the antennas nearby us in hand as we go through the intersection, they get a pretty bird's eye view of the two logos, American flag, and of course we're on the west side of the building, and we have the high bay doors 2 and 4. So slowly as we go, and as you can see, we pick up that logo Artemis and making our way slowly where you may get a photo. Up ahead, we do have waterway, which we call the gator hole, so we'll be dropping accordingly to see that as well. And of course, between the two buildings here, and off of the distance, we have that Launchpad 39B, as you see there in the middle. And of course, the question has always been, how do we get to the pad? Well, here's that answer.
In front of Crawler Transporter number 2 at the Kennedy Space Center. Crawler Transporter number 2 will be used for the SLS program to take the launch vehicle back and forth to the pad. We will begin by going underneath the mobile launcher. We'll pick it up, we'll take it over to the VAB. They'll then assemble the launch vehicle on top of the mobile launcher, and then we'll come back to the VAB, we'll slide underneath it again, we'll pick it up, we'll take it out to the pad, the trip of about 4.2 miles. It'll take us about 7 hours to get there. But during our trip to the launch pad, we'll roll over a specially prepared crawler way that consists of anywhere from 8 to 12 inches of special rock. Below that is limestone that's about 4 feet thick and compressed to hold the weight of the crawler and the mobile launcher. And then below that is some hydraulically compacted sand that can support all the weight. And then once we're there, we'll drop it all off. And then a few days later, there'll be a launch. We'll come back, we'll pick the mobile launcher up, and we'll bring it back to the VAB to start the process all over again.
With 50 years and some 3,000 kilometers or 2,000 miles on the clock, NASA expects the crawlers to be in operation for at least another 3 decades. How cool is that? The latest refurbishment is complete, and preparation is well underway for the first SLS mission. The crawler will be doing what it was originally designed to do once again, which is moving rockets.
Why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
When President John F. Kennedy made this speech in 1962, he set in motion an era of discovery that would change humankind forever. 7 years after he spoke these ambitious words, the world watched as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first people to walk on the moon. The achievements of the men and technology we use every day. NASA and the thriving private space industry at Kennedy Space Center today are the living legacy of their story. As we arrive at the Apollo Saturn V Center to learn more about that historic era, get ready to step back into a time when NASA had everything to prove to a nation focused on one goal: to be the first country to land a person on the moon.
Which means traveling again. And a world where peace hung in a delicate balance and seemed to be like dangerous advantages. Every ham radio operator in America could hear the beacon. People were afraid. Were the Soviets looking down on us? Watching us? If they could make a satellite pass over our cities, could they do the same with a bomb? Our own space program kicked into high gear, and less than 2 months later, we were ready to launch our own satellite. It was being called the Space Race, and we were running a distant second. In 1961, we fell even further behind. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man into space, circling the world in just 89 minutes. We had our own astronauts, and they were eager and ready to take the big ride. But our manned space program couldn't seem to get off the ground. We stuck with it, and on May 5th, 1961, things finally started going right. Astronaut Alan Shepard took his ship Freedom 7 6.5 miles into space. America had its first space hero. Just a few days later, our space program received a new challenge. But this one did not come from the Soviet Union. It came from our young president. In one inspiring moment, he changed the mission from one based in fear of the present to one of hope for the future.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We hadn't been more than 16 minutes into space, and now we were going to the moon. We would have to design a rocket the size of a 36-story office building, put it together with the precision of a microscope, and accelerate it to the speed of a bullet. Then we would have to guide it to a moving target 250,000 miles away. Many people thought it was an impossible dream, but 400,000 of us set about making that dream a reality. It would be the longest, most hazardous voyage that any man had dared to attempt. But step by step, mission by mission, we orbited the Earth, perfecting the skills and technologies we would need on this incredible journey. Our astronauts practiced maneuvering, docking, and the 1,000 other tasks that would comprise the moon mission. We created new alloys, lighter and stronger than anything seen before. We designed communication systems that would be reliable over the vast distance. And behind it all, we tried to perfect the rocket that would be powerful enough to punch out of Earth orbit and take us to the moon. One day, however, the dream of flying to the moon almost slipped away. It was January 27th, 1967. Astronauts Virgil Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee were on board Apollo 1 for a plugs-up test, a full-scale dress rehearsal for the actual launch. Suddenly it happened. There was a fire in the capsule. 3 men whose lives had been in our hands were lost.
Surely the opening vistas of space promise high costs and hardships that any risks in which to look behind them.
After Apollo 1, some thought we'd failed, and that the moon was out of our reach. But we owed it to those men, to learn from their sacrifice, and to carry on. We started taking the Apollo vehicle apart, piece by piece. Was the design flawed? Had safety been compromised? Tough questions. And we spent 1.5 years redesigning the spacecraft so that no astronaut's life would ever be at risk because we overlooked something, or because we could have done something better. A moon rocket is 91% high explosive, and it goes into the most unforgiving, hazardous environment there is. We could never make it risk-free, and the men who flew them knew that. We didn't send men into space again until Apollo 7 orbited the Earth testing some of the new design. When everything worked perfectly, the decision was made. The next mission would travel to the moon. It was mankind's destiny to leave the shores of our planet behind and strike out across the vast ocean of space. In the great span of our history, now was the time that we could. Now was the time that we would. We stood on the eve of the longest, most dangerous journey that any man had ever undertaken. And it would be taken by Frank Borman, James Lovell, and William Anders, the crew of Apollo 8. Through those doors, you'll find the firing room, launch control, just as it was on December 21st, 1968. 3 consoles we sat at when men first took off to fly to the moon. The tragedy of Apollo 1 had put us 1.5 years behind. We were making up for it in one big leap, and we were doing it with a rocket that no man had ever flown before. It was a few days before Christmas 1968 when Apollo 8 sat on the pad. She was the first of a new kind, a moon rocket. This was the Phoenix, risen from the ashes of Apollo 1. The first Apollo crew did not die in vain. This was to be their testament. "36 stories high, she had been fully fueled throughout the night. The liquid oxygen in her tanks caused ice to form on the outside of the craft. The extreme temperature differences between the air and the sub-zero fuel caused the metal skin of the rocket to expand and contract. Everyone who was on the pad agreed. It was as though the rocket was alive, breathing, straining at the leash. Earlier in the morning, astronauts Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders had made their final preparations before taking that long ride out to the waiting spacecraft. The minimum safe distance from Saturn V at liftoff was 3 miles. The reason was simple. When fully fueled, the rocket contained the explosive power of an atomic bomb. As the clock counted down, the astronauts and all of us in launch control went through the pre-flight checks. Our hands on the controls of the most powerful, most complex machine ever built. It had over 2 million separate systems, and to bring these men back alive, everything had to work perfectly. Each individual system had been tested, but what we didn't know was how they would perform when all 2 million began to work together. That moment would come when the countdown clock reached 0. If a maneuvering thruster failed, if communications broke down, if navigation was off by 1 degree, if any piece of the miles of wiring, circuits, relays, or valves was defective, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders would pay with their lives. As they sat, waiting for launch on that chill December morning, these 3 astronauts were back to with what they had always been, test pilots. You are now in the final minutes before the launch of Apollo 8, right here where it actually happened. Mankind is about to leave his planet behind and journey to another. It is one of those rare moments when history is not being made, destiny is being embraced.
This is Launch Control, T-minus 3 minutes and counting. We've completed our communications checks with the Apollo 8 astronauts in the cabin, and the communications are go. During this period, once we do get the firing command, the various tanks within the 3 stages of the Saturn V launch vehicle begin to pressurize. We have firing command. The firing command is in. We are now on the automatic sequence. T-minus 2 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Our status board indicates that all aspects are ready. Instrument unit is ready. Spacecraft ready. Final check of the emergency detection system. That ready light also on. First stage preparations are completed.
All systems are A-OK.
Okay, keep going.
We're on. Ready to go to cockpit.
Stand by, Walter. Okay, you're on.
All systems go.
1 minute, 45 seconds and counting. The first stage liquid oxygen tank has been pressurized, and the pressure is still building up. Coming up on 90 seconds, mark, T-minus 90 seconds and counting. The Apollo 8 crew standing by, Spacecraft Commander Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, Bill Anders. We now report that the liquid hydrogen tank in the third stage is pressurized. 1 minute, 15 seconds. All third stage propellants pressurized at this time as we come up on the 60-second mark on the flight to the moon. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. The vehicle now is completely pressurized. We're coming up on a power transfer shortly. We have the power transfer. We're now on the flight batteries within the launch vehicle. Final reports coming from Frank Borman at this time. Final look at the switch list aboard the spacecraft. 20 seconds, all aspects. We are still low at this time. T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. The engines are armed. 4, 3.
Apollo 8 successfully orbited the moon, and the astronauts returned safely to the Earth. I know. I'm Jim Lovell, and I was one of the crew of this spacecraft, Apollo 8. We were the first men to see the surface of the moon from just a few miles away. But it was the hundreds of thousands of men and women who worked in the team and the millions of people who supported the mission that really made it possible. That way, I guess, we all went to the moon. Now, on the other side of those doors, you'll find an actual Saturn V moon rocket. It's still the most powerful, the most complex machine ever built. And I guess it's the only one that can take you to another planet. I actually got to fly one on a second flight to the moon called Apollo 13. But that's another story.
That means all five together, 7.5 million pounds of thrust, which is a good thing because fully loaded, the Saturn V weighed 6.2 million pounds. Up until last year, the Saturn V remained the most powerful rocket ever launched, but at 8.1 million pounds of thrust, the new SLS just nudges it into second place. So we're going to swing around here towards our command and service module. Now this piece of the rocket really belongs at the other end of the building, but we're going to start our story here, and we're actually going to walk through the steps as if you were an astronaut going on one of these Apollo missions that never happened, perhaps Apollo 18, for which we believe this rocket may have been intended. On the morning of your launch day, you're going to want to eat a tasty breakfast, maybe some steak and eggs like the Apollo 11 guys did, because the food you're going to be getting the rest of the week will not be especially appetizing. Then you and your two fellow astronauts will exit the operations and checkout building to get into an Astro van. You'll see one of the original Astro vans at the end of the tour as well. That van's going to drive you 8.5 miles out to the launch pad where waiting for you will be not only the mighty Saturn V, but the tall launch tower.
Will begin in 3 minutes. If you would like to join us, please proceed to the nose end of the Saturn V rocket. Thank you.
Welcome. And just so you know, that film does show every 15 minutes, so you'll have plenty of opportunities to be able to see it a bit later. And that tall launch tower is not just an empty scaffolding that we leave this big firework up against. It is in and of itself a complex machine involved in fueling, systems monitoring, and many other things. Now, the launch tower, other than this, was recently upgraded and refurbished, adding a crew access arm for the astronauts next year, and was reinstalled out on Launch Pad 39B for further testing. My favorite thing, though, about the launch tower, it is part of somebody's job 2 times a day to ride the elevator in the launch tower to the top, and then to walk down all the stairs. Definitely not a job I would want today. That is not to make sure that the stairs are still working. That is actually to try to deter birds who might be trying to nest in the launch tower. We're in a nature preserve that affects everything we do. If you're an Apollo astronaut, though, you're going to ride that elevator 363 feet to the top of this rocket, where waiting for you will be technicians to unload you into this silver capsule. This capsule is called the command module, and that is going to be your home for the rest of the week. As you can see, that from the outside, not a whole lot of room for 3 full-grown adults. If you do want to be an astronaut, I'm sorry to tell you that claustrophobia is not an option. Behind the command module, we have the service module, and that's where this machine gets its most commonly used name. We love abbreviations and acronyms here at NASA, so the command and service modules become the CSM. In the service module, we've got life support systems, we've got navigational and computer equipment, and if you remember the movie Apollo 13, or if you lived through those real-life events yourself, right there is where Houston had a problem. There was an explosion of one of the oxygen tanks that was part of the life support system, and that's what put that mission into peril. So, we're locked in our capsule, we're ready to count down. Let's take a look at the rest of the rocket. Expensive and pretty challenging to work with, and when you follow the first 2 Artemis launch attempts, may have heard a bit about that. So those are some reasons we don't use it in the big first stage. Now, maybe on stage 2, we still have 5 engines, but these obviously are not those big F1s. These are J2 engines. Something kind of amazing about them, these engines are still being used in rocketry today, pretty much unchanged from their original design half a century ago. That's especially impressive when you stop to realize that the pocket calculator wasn't mass-produced
stopped going to the moon. And a computer in the era of Apollo didn't refer to a machine. If you've seen the movie or read the excellent book Hidden Figures, you'll know about this. It refers to a person who did computations. All of the math that was done to build this rocket, get it to the moon, and bring our astronauts safely home to Earth was done with a pencil and a slide rule and the incredible minds of the men and women of the Apollo program. Again, truly a testament to their genius, and 50 years later, this is still a viable rocket and new design. So, what do we do when we're done with stage 2? Second verse, same as the first. We pop it off, we chuck it in the ocean, we move on up.